the wine tasted like almonds, bitter almonds. I noticed it on the first sip, but I didn't say anything. Julian had poured it himself, which he never did, and he was watching me over the rim of his own glass with an expression I couldn't quite read. The candlelight from our anniversary dinner flickered between us, casting shadows across the dining room of our Tribeca penthouse. Rose petals were scattered across the white tablecloth. A string quartet played through hidden speakers. Everything was perfect, suspiciously perfect, the kind of perfect that Julian only achieved when he wanted something. To 5 years, Julian said, raising his glass. His smile was practiced, the same smile he used in board meetings when he was about to gut a competitor. The best 5 years of my life. I raised my glass too, but I didn't drink. I watched him take a sip from his own wine. The wine from a different bottle, I noticed. His glass was fuller than mine, the color slightly darker. He'd switched the bottles, or he'd poured from 2 different ones. Either way, he wasn't drinking what I was drinking. You're not thirsty? Julian asked, his eyes flicking to my untouched glass. I'm savoring it. I swirled the wine, watching the legs run down the crystal. You went to a lot of trouble tonight. The roses, the music, the private chef. What's the occasion? Can't a husband celebrate his wife without an ulterior motive? A husband could. Julian couldn't. In 5 years of marriage, I had learned that every gesture from Julian came with a price tag. The diamond earrings he'd given me on our first anniversary had been followed by a request to co-sign a loan. The trip to Paris for my 30th birthday had been a cover for a series of meetings with investors he didn't want me to know about. And tonight felt like the culmination of something. Something I had been watching build for months. I received an interesting phone call today, I said, setting down my glass, from a woman named Margot. She said she was your secretary. She wanted to know when you planned to tell me about the baby. Julian's hand froze halfway to his wine glass for a single, suspended moment. His mask slipped, and I saw something underneath. Not guilt, not shame, but cold, calculating fury. Then the mask was back, and he was laughing, shaking his head. Margot. She's been struggling with some mental health issues. I had to let her go last week. She's been making harassing calls to all my contacts. I'm so sorry you got dragged into it. She sent me photos, I said quietly, of the 2 of you, I and our Hamptons house, I and my bed, with dates spanning the last 18 months. She also sent me copies of your joint bank statements, your lease on an apartment in Chelsea, and a screenshot of a text where you called me. Let me get this right. The obstacle. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. The string quartet kept playing, oblivious. The candles kept flickering. Julian set down his wine glass with a soft click. All right, he said, and his voice had changed. The practice charm was gone, replaced by something colder, more clinical. You know, fine, Margot and I are together. She's pregnant. She's giving me the son you were never able to carry, and I've already filed the paperwork to restructure our assets. By the end of the month, you'll be out of this house, out of the company, and out of my life. The company. I almost laughed. You mean Vita Life Pharmaceuticals, the company I founded 8 years ago with the inheritance my grandmother left me. The company I built from a 2-person lab into a $4 billion enterprise. The company I gave you a 25% stake in as a wedding gift, even though my lawyers advised against it. That company. The company I now control. Julian leaned back in his chair, his smile returning. You've been so busy in the lab, Vivian. You never paid attention to the business side. You didn't notice when I gradually bought out 3 of our 5 board members. You didn't notice when I transferred the patent rights for your cancer immunotherapy to a shell company I control. You didn't notice when I slowly diluted your shares through a series of equity issuances that you were too distracted to review. You own 17% now, Vivian, that I own 51. The company is mine. I should have felt shocked, and I should have felt rage. Instead, I felt a strange, detached calm. The calm of a surgeon watching a patient bleed out on the table, knowing exactly where to apply pressure to save them. 17%, I repeated. You've been busy. I've been patient 0.5 years of patience, 0.5 years of pretending to love a woman who was more interested in her microscopes than her husband. 5 years of building my position while you played with your little experiments, 0.5 years, Vivian. And now it's over. He pushed my wine glass toward me. Drink your wine. It's an excellent vintage. I picked it out especially for you. I looked at the glass. The bitter almond scent wafted up toward me. Cyanide, I was almost certain. Julian was a chemist by training. He'd know how to dose it. A few milligrams, enough to induce cardiac arrest within the hour. IT would look like a heart attack. IT would look like the heart condition my mother had died from at 42. It would look like tragedy, not murder. You're going to kill me? I said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to free you. You've been so unhappy. Vivian, everyone's noticed the long hours, the exhaustion, the weight loss. Your medical records already show an arrhythmia. When you collapse tonight, no one will be surprised, and I'll be the grieving widower, carrying on your legacy, building the company you always dreamed of. You've thought of everything. I always do. I picked up the wine glass. I held it to my lips. Julian watched me with the hungry eyes of a predator waiting for the kill. And then I set it down. There's one thing you didn't think of, I said. Julian's eyes narrowed. And what's that? Margot, the woman you impregnated, the woman who sent me the photos. Did you know she called me 3 months ago, not to harass me? Tio warned me. She told me everything, Julian, everything. The equity dilution, the patent theft, the board manipulation, the cyanide you purchased through a front company in Delaware. She gave me documentation, bank records, emails, the toxicology report from the rat you tested the dosage on. Julian's face went white. That's not. Margot would never. She loves me. She's carrying my child. She's carrying your child, and she's terrified of you. She's been terrified of you for months. She told me about the way you grabbed her arm when she questioned the cyanide purchase. She told me about the threats you made when she said she was having second thoughts. She told me everything, Julian, and I've been waiting for tonight. Waiting to see if you'd actually go through with it. I stood up, and my voice rose. You've been building your position for 5 years. I've been building mine for 5 years and 3 months, ever since Margot's first phone call. You diluted my shares? I bought them back through a blind trust you never knew about. You transferred my patents. I filed provisional patents 2 months before you, and my documentation proves prior invention. You bought 3 board members. I've been recording every conversation with them for the past 18 months, and all 3 have admitted, on tape, to accepting bribes from you. I pulled out my phone and pressed a button. The dining room door opened. 6 people walked in, 3 federal agents, 2 corporate attorneys, and a woman Julian recognized with dawning horror, Margot. His Margot, wearing a wire, her belly round with pregnancy, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. I'm sorry, Julian, she whispered. I couldn't let you kill her. I couldn't let you kill anyone. Julian lunged toward her, but the federal agents intercepted him, their hands closing around his arms, their expressions utterly indifferent to his fury. Julian Hale, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, corporate fraud, and patent theft. You have the right to remain silent. This is a setup. Julian screamed, his composure shattering. She's lying. All of them are lying. Vivian, tell them. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. I walked around the table and stood in front of him. The wine in my glass, it's been tested. IT contains cyanide. Your fingerprints are on the bottle. Your purchase of the cyanide was recorded by the front company, and Margot has the receipts. You're going to prison, Julian, for a very long time. I loved you. His voice cracked. In the beginning, I loved you. No, you loved what I could give you. And when you thought you'd taken everything, you tried to kill me. But you made one mistake. You underestimated Margot, and you underestimated me. I turned to the agents. Take him away. Julian was dragged toward the elevator, still shouting, my name, threats, please, all tangled together in a desperate, incoherent flood. When the doors closed behind him, the penthouse fell silent. Margot stood trembling, her hands pressed against her belly. Ms. Hale, Vivian, I'm so sorry. For everything. I knew what he was doing, and I didn't stop him until... You stopped him in time. I took her hands. That's what matters. What do you need? What can I do? I just want to go home. My parents are in Vermont. I haven't seen them in a year. Julian wouldn't let me. I nodded. I'll arrange a car. And Margot, the baby, if you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. That's not a conditional offer. That's a promise. She broke down crying, and I held her for a long moment while the attorneys waited, and the federal agents secured the scene. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were clearer. There's one more thing you should know, she said. Julian wasn't the only 1.3 members of your board helped him plan everything. And the CEO of Apex Pharmaceuticals, He was going to buy the company after Julian took control. They had a deal. I know. I smiled. I've known about all of them for months, and they're about to learn exactly what happens when you try to steal from me. The board meeting was scheduled for the following morning. Julian had planned to announce the tragic news of my death and his assumption of full control. Instead, I walked into the conference room at Vitalife headquarters at 9 a.m. sharp, flanked by my legal team and carrying a folder that was very, very thick. The 3 board members who had betrayed me, Howard, Patricia, and Marcus, were already seated. Their faces, when they saw me walk in, were priceless. Vivian, Howard stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over his coffee. We thought, Julian said. Julian said I'd be dead by now. I dropped the folder onto the conference table with a satisfying thud. Julian is in federal custody. He's been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and 17 counts of fraud. He's never coming back. And you 3, you're going to tell me exactly what you did and exactly who else was involved, or you're going to join him. Patricia's face crumpled immediately. She was the weakest link, and I knew it. It was Julian's idea. He approached us individually, told us we'd be rewarded if we supported the restructuring. I didn't know about the murder, but I swear I didn't know. You knew about the fraud. You knew about the patent theft. You knew he was stealing my company, and you voted with him anyway. Marcus tried a different approach. Vivian, let's be reasonable. You need us. We're the senior board members. If you fire all 3 of us, the company will be destabilized. Investors will panic. The stock will plummet. You're not senior board members anymore. I pulled 3 documents from the folder and slid them across the table. These are termination agreements, effective immediately. You'll forfeit your shares, your voting rights, and your severance packages in exchange. I won't refer you to the SEC for criminal prosecution. Sign them. You can't do this. Howard slammed his fist on the table. We have rights. We have contracts. You have nothing. The contracts you signed include morality clauses. Conspiring to commit corporate fraud violates those clauses. MY legal team has already reviewed everything. You have 0 leverage. Sign the papers, or we proceed with criminal charges. They signed point 1 by 1, their hands shaking, their faces gray. By 9:30, they were gone, escorted out of the building by security, their personal effects in cardboard boxes, their careers in ruins. I sat down at the head of the conference table, in a chair that had been Julian's, and I looked out at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Vitalife Tower rose 40 stories above Manhattan, a monument to everything I had built, and for the first time in 5 years, it was mine again, completely, utterly, irrevocably mine. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, Dr. Hale. My name is Adrian Sterling. I'm the CEO of Sterling Global. I've been following the news about your ex-husband's arrest. I wanted to say that what you did, surviving, exposing him, reclaiming your company, was extraordinary. If you're ever interested in a partnership between Vitalife and Sterling Global, my door is opened. AS, asterisk. Adrian Sterling. The name was familiar. Everyone in the pharmaceutical industry knew Sterling Global, the massive investment conglomerate that had been quietly acquiring medical research companies for the past 5 years. I'd heard rumors about their CEO, about his reclusiveness, about the way he only invested in companies he believed in personally. I typed back, asterisk, Mr. Sterling, thank you for the note. I'm not looking for partners right now. I'm rebuilding, but I appreciate the offer. Dr. Vivian de Halle. His response came almost immediately. Asterisk, I understand. But when you're ready, I'd like to hear your story in person. Not the one in the newspapers, the real one, as asterisk. I stared at the message for a long moment. The real one, the story of how I'd spent 5 years being gaslit by a man who was slowly poisoning my body and my company. The story of how I'd found out and chosen to wait to gather evidence, to build my case while pretending everything was fine. The story of how I'd sat across from my husband on our anniversary and watched him pour me a glass of cyanide and said nothing. That story wasn't for the newspapers, but maybe it was for someone. The trial was brutal and swift. Julian's defense attorney tried to paint me as an unstable woman who had fabricated everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. The cyanide purchase records. Margot's testimony, the taped conversations with the board members, the forensic accountant's report showing the systematic dilution of my shares. Julian was convicted on all counts. Sentencing. life in prison without the possibility of parole. The day of his sentencing, I sat in the courtroom and watched him be led away in chains. He didn't look at me, he couldn't. The man who had spent 5 years trying to destroy me had finally been forced to see exactly who he had been trying to destroy. As I walked out of the courthouse, Margot was waiting on the steps, her baby, a girl, not a boy, in her arms. Julian had been wrong about everything, even the gender of his child. "She's beautiful," I said, looking down at the tiny face. I named her Grace. Margot's voice was steady, "Because that's what you gave me, grace. When you should have hated me, you helped me. I'll never forget that." I touched the baby's cheek. He didn't win. Neither of us let him win. That's what matters. Vitalife Pharmaceuticals entered a new era of growth. I hired a new board, diverse, ethical, fiercely loyal. I expanded the cancer immunotherapy research division that Julian had been starving of funds. Within 18 months, we had 3 new drugs in clinical trials. Within 3 years, one of them received FDA approval and was projected to save thousands of lives annually. I became a symbol in the business press, the woman who had survived her husband's attempt to murder her and rebuilt her empire from the ashes. I gave interviews and I wrote op-eds. I spoke at conferences about corporate governance and the dangers of letting personal relationships cloud business judgment. My story became a cautionary tale, a rallying cry, a source of hope. And 6 months after the verdict, I finally accepted Adrian Sterling's invitation. He flew me to his private estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling property overlooking the Atlantic, with a library that contained first editions of every book I had ever loved. He was tall, silver-haired, with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He was also, I learned over dinner, unexpectedly funny, disarmingly honest, and nothing like the cold corporate raider the press made him out to be. "I've been following your career for a decade," he admitted over dessert. "I tried to recruit you to Sterling Global before you founded Vitalife. You turned me down. I remember. You sent me a letter. It said, 'Dear Dr. Hale, you're wasting your talents at a mid-tier pharmaceutical company. Come work for me instead.' I thought you were arrogant and presumptuous." He laughed. "I was. I still am. But I was also right. You were wasted there. And you built something extraordinary instead." "So did you." "We both did." He leaned forward. "I'm not going to ask you to merge your company with mine or to give up your independence till I know you fought too hard for it. But I would like to propose a different kind of partnership, a personal one if you're open to it." I looked at him. This man who had been circling my orbit for a decade, who had reached out at my darkest moment with nothing but admiration and respect, who had waited patiently for me to rebuild my life. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Real, uncomplicated hope. "I might be open to it," I said, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "I keep my company. I keep my name. I keep my independence. And if you ever try to poison my wine, I'll return the favor with interest." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had finally found his equal. I would expect nothing less. We were married a year later, in a small ceremony on his Hamptons estate. Margot was my maid of honor. Her daughter Grace, now a toddler, scattered flower petals down the aisle. And when I walked toward Adrian, I walked toward a future I had built with my own 2 hands. Not a rescue, not a merger, but a true partnership. 5 years after my ex-husband tried to kill me, I stood on the balcony of our new home, looking out at the Atlantic Ocean, my husband's arm around my waist, my company thriving, my heart whole. Somewhere in a federal prison, Julian Hale was eating cafeteria food and counting the decades until his death. Somewhere, the board members who had betrayed me were living shrunken lives. Somewhere, the cyanide bottle he had used was sitting in an evidence locker, a relic of a crime that had nearly succeeded. But it hadn't succeeded. I had survived. And I had won. Not because I was lucky, not because I was special, but because I had finally learned that the only person who could save me was the woman I had always been, the scientist, the strategist, the survivor. The one who had spent 5 years building her case, while everyone around her thought she was blind. I hadn't been blind. I had been watching and waiting and preparing. And when the moment came, I had been ready.